All righty, here we go.
Woo-hoo. Hey, we're on the air.
Yes, we are.
Wow, just like that. Hey, we're Power and Speed.
Just like that.
Just like that. Yeah, we are Power and Speed. 908-751-0211 if you dare.
Tom, is it Monday?
It's Monday, man.
Monday all night.
That's Mike's line. He forgot his...
I don't even give a shit.
We didn't have the cue cards up today.
And like us on the good old, Facebook and iTunes and other fun social media like that.
What'd I tell you about raising your voice like that?
Oh, sorry.
Just buried the compressor.
Thanks, buddy. How's your thumb, Ted?
My thumb? I'm not going to be hitchhiking anytime soon. It's kind of lost at work.
Yeah, that was pretty gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was
like if this kind of shit bothers you, don't.
Here's the funny one. My brother is squeamish about this crap, right? He delivered his second child. I mean, to the point the kid's coming out, the umbilical cord is wrapped around the child's throat. Had to push
Runs in a family, huh?
Had to push the child back in, unwrap it, and deliver the child.
Really?
And
push the kid back in?
Yes,
Never heard of
seriously.
that.
Got a plunger, just
Yeah.
Hey, he did that. I mean, he went through that. Then the doula got there that's supposed to deliver the child. He said, "You're overpaid. Go fucking clean up the mess." And got on the phone, and told everybody, "Yeah, I have a daughter now." And like,
did these stories just they take such crazy turns,
yeah,
don't they? All right, so let's just.
Did you say Abdullah? What was that word?
It's a doula or something. It's not a midwife. It's a doula.
Doula, yeah.
Is that like a truck with
I don't know.
extra
Not a
rims in the
dually.
back?
Two tailpipes? I don't
Not
know.
a fifth wheel. None of that
This
stuff.
is a car show. What is he talking about?
I don't know. I just, Tad, as long as you're okay, that's all we're really concerned
He's
about,
got all
buddy.
his digits.
Hey, actually, I got the doctor at the emergency service place. Go, man. There's nothing we can do about that. He sent me off to.
What was he looking at your brain?
Hey, sent me to the
Did a quick
emergency
CAT scan, say,
room.
like, your fuck, sir.
Yeah.
Sent me to the emergency room. They looked at it. They put a foam on that coagulates your blood and stops the bleeding and crap like that, which is weird. That's about it. Now I have to go to a freaking plastic surgeon that specializes in hands and everything, have them check that out and all that crap.
Guess your hand modeling career is over. Huh?
Yes, it is. It sucks.
Screeching halt.
All right, we also got Fireman Jeff here,
Hey.
who actually got some track time in, finally getting that thing going a little better. So you're getting there.
He went pretty fast, no?
I think it went pretty good. What's that thing weigh?
4370 for me in it.
Incredible for
Yeah, it's a 2014
Yes.
SS.
Yep.
Yeah, which is really a Holden, right?
Yep.
Yep. I think that's a
You're
good
Holden.
number. I mean, 132, no matter how you slice it, that to me is decent.
Could you imagine? 4,300-pound car going 1070s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back in the day, you had a Camaro that you got down to 3,000. And if you went, if you went 1199 in a street car, you were going pretty fast.
I know, and I remember like Jeff and I were talking about going back, like, we were like, hey, yeah, these Trans Ams are heavy. They're 3,500 or 36. Our formula's lighter than
Yeah.
Look where we are now.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But no, I think that's, I mean, I think it can be a little better.
Yeah, a little better.
And the guy that we're going to talk to this evening, he does know a little bit about this. And also, I think you talked about him to me, and Matt talked about him for the flex fuel stuff, right?
Yep. That's who I'm going to for my flex fuel sensor.
Okay.
Really?
Apparently, he's like the wizard.
Seems like it.
Yeah. I think he actually wears a wizard hat.
And Paul Yaw was impressed that he was going to be on. So that's got to say something good, doesn't it?
Well, truth be told, I think I got his name way back. Like Paul and I talked about him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, you got to get Dave on. He actually wears a wizard cap." No, he didn't say that. But Paul said something really good about him, which he'll be good.
Well, I got to tell you, I did open up HP tuners and did some poking around.
Yeah, I saw.
Thoroughly confused.
Yeah.
Because it is like completely different than what I would have expected.
Intake valve temp.
I think
we got to get to the bottom of that, if nothing else.
They have a sensor for that?
My guess.
Yeah, good point, Tad. He is alive. He did ask the right question.
My thought is they put that this is full of maybe template data for other things that you would use.
Yeah.
I guess.
So it's a known quantity at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's the first time I opened this thing up and looked at it. I bought it 2 or 3 years ago. It's been sitting in a box.
Yeah.
I used it to troubleshoot something a long time. Never did anything else with it.
Yeah. You did an LS swap on your lawnmower or something, right?
Yeah. No, I never bothered looking at anything. But, I figured we'd take a look at some of this stuff to just try to understand it. And the timing stuff kind of makes sense. I mean, you can see all that stuff, inlet air temp change, like your base timing map. But going further than that, like in the fuel side, maybe specifically because of things that are mass air, it's a little confusing for me because I've never looked at that stuff.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, it's
well, we'll get some answers. I think we'll get some answers.
I hope so.
So what else? No racing this weekend other than Fireman Jeff?
No.
You want to talk about the Cup race where they crashed every car there?
No. I just couldn't give two shits about Cup. I was watching football.
You've been saying that for 120 some shows now.
I know. I was watching.
And it still holds true.
I was watching football. It was halftime.
I heard the pace car came in third.
It might have one or two more laps. It might have been that way.
Pink SS.
Every time I went back, they were wrecked and there were less cars. I can't imagine it. On the lead lap, maybe there were 10.
Wow.
Maybe it was like going to Bridgeport, watching the guys drive around in a dirt race.
Wow.
It was that bad.
Sounds like a Bristol race where they're driving around without doors and, front ends off. And
Well,
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
and it's Talladega.
Yeah. And I think the only car that wasn't on the lead lap was Matt Kenseth if he finished. I lost track of everyone who got wrecked out of the race.
Well, I like I said,
Nobody
I
got hurt though, right?
No.
I looked at it at halftime. I saw what was going on. Went back. I think I went to the other game. Went back. There's less cars. Went back again. There's less cars.
Hey, wait, time. Can we talk about football for 1 second?
Sure.
Did you watch Jets game?
Mm-hmm.
You believe they took that touchdown away?
Yes, because the way that
You're not a football guy. Shut
the way that the rule is written, I can kind of understand the point they were making.
But it wasn't a fumble.
I don't think it was a fumble.
That's the problem.
I know, but they're saying
if he fumbled the ball out of the end zone, that rule applies. But it wasn't a fumble.
but he was fumbling while going in and then crossed into out of bounds and then regained control. That's what they were saying. It's the way the rule is written. It's fucked up.
No,
But I mean, to me, that was a touchdown.
The way it was interpreted was wrong too.
Yes.
Because he didn't fumble the ball.
No.
There's no rule that says you can't. What if he was changing hands?
Actually,
on the mic, Jeff.
Actually, what they say to you is you have to have control of the ball and you have to make a football move.
Nope, that's when you
swear
catch
to
that.
God.
Nope, that's starting to catch. That has nothing to do with what happened there. That's when you're making a catch.
Okay.
I know football rules,
Yes,
Okay.
and they just straight up fucked it up. And we're going to start getting yelled at, so that's enough of football.
Fuck these people.
Yeah, really.
My show. All right. And I posted pictures of some Corvette progress. So
Yeah,
like
so-
everybody liked that.
Yeah.
Then
yeah.
the mid-engine
really
stuff
good.
came up.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to that yet. I mean, I'm sure there's a car. I'm
Right.
sure it exists. They
Oh, there's
apparently already broke down the production line.
Well, the
and
big question is what engines it going to have or whatnot. And
I don't know. Do we know anybody that should know?
Yeah.
All right.
You?
So we'll talk about that
Yeah.
off
yeah.
the air
Yeah. Yeah.
to not dump
Yeah.
anybody's credibility.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right.
I don't think they're not going to put a Ford Coyote in it or anything like that.
oh,
You understand my
Much
point? I just hope it doesn't go to a dual overhead cam thing
Yeah, out of nowhere.
because there's nothing for it.
or a V6 turbo thing or something maybe.
I really hope it's not a V6.
No, the coolest thing would be if it was an LSA or something like that. Just an LS in the mid-engine position.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Not only that,
At least for a little while.
I mean, the Ford things with their four cams and heads and everything, they're like 17 miles wide.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
So, I mean, I would think that a mid-engine car, a pushrod engine would be a little better in that location.
LS is nice, compact.
I think so.
It'll be good.
Swappable into everything.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's what I'd like. I mean, if that comes out, that's what I'll get.
Yeah, they're cool. It looks cool, actually.
All right.
I think it looks better than what we got
You
now.
going to be the early adopter or are you going to let it go
No, I'd probably let it go a year.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is you'll buy the first one,
And you get all the bugs
and then
worked
they'll
out,
make a
but
better
yeah.
one. You know, I'd want like the Z06 type version. You know, the good one.
They'll fix all the problems that the first generation had, and then
Yeah,
then
probably.
you'll buy in.
That too. Yeah. Well,
Sure.
we have a guest on the line. Let's bring him in. Hey, Dave. It's Tom. You're on the air, man.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How about you?
I'm surviving. My fire alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, so I've been up for a while.
Wow, that sucks. Well, we got a lot of people here that are pretty excited that you're finally on the show. We've had people talk
I'm
about you
excited
quite
to
a
let
bit.
them
Nah, you'll be fine. So, we kind of know what you do, but for the audience, why don't you let us know what your specialties are? Because it's actually pretty cool and specialized what you do. Have at it.
I think the best way to describe what I do is I just tinker with stuff for a living. But, I try to do things that are meaningful and not necessarily just a waste of time. And a lot of times that just involves answering questions that, either people ask or people didn't even know they should ask. It's more just about solving problems that come up and trying to make things easier to implement. And usually that focuses around a factory GM computer, trying to do more with what you start with.
So when you say answer questions, you really mean fix a problem in a way that you see fit.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put my own spin on it and try to, just do what I think works best.
Let me. This is Mike, Dave. Let me ask you a question. Are the items you're addressing in the computer, are they limitations in the computer, or are they limitations in the software that we have to be able to manipulate the factory computer?
It both, I guess, is the way to answer that question. Injector flow rate in a GM computer, that's probably the most obvious one that pops out on people. And, there's a couple tricks to get around that, but eventually it's like you have an injector that's so big that maybe you have an older computer and you just can't get around it. And, that's something that I started to mess with C6 Corvettes, for example. In 2010, all the Corvettes got an upgrade on their hardware, and they got double the injector flow rate limit. But the problem is, starting in 2008, they started using a clutch position sensor instead of just a switch, just an on-off switch. So, that was something that popped up. How do I make this newer computer work in an older car that doesn't have a clutch position sensor? Because it's not feasible to swap the whole pedal assembly. So, started poking around at that just to get access to better tables and things, and eventually found a way around it. Found, with the help of HP tuners, was able to get some things mapped that allowed, putting later hardware in an earlier Corvette. And that's, been something that's been super successful, and a lot of people have run with that and had great results. They enjoy the fact that they get this updated hardware to fix issues that they've had from day one.
That's interesting.
Well, let's start here. Is there a place that, as a factory GM tuner, that you would say, look, when we get to this is the limitation, it's hard to overcome? Is it an injector flow rate thing? Is it a I don't know, injector driving thing? Like what puts the guy out of range of a stock computer? Like if we had to define like where a guy should be using a stock, because I personally am a big fan of the stock computer because it does everything in the car so wonderfully.
Sure.
It has a lot of resolution, at least in my opinion.
Well, it just works.
Yeah, it just works. And it's all plugged in already. There's nothing to do.
It's there, right. Yeah.
But, everybody says that you get to a point that you just can't trust them or you can't use them. What's your opinion on that?
I think it really boils down to just what kind of features you want to add. I mean, there's really no usable traction control with a factory computer. Some of the later GM stuff has the launch control. Like in the ZR1, they have performance traction management, which, I've used that, say, 900 horsepower ZR1s, and it works really well. But, that's something that you can't necessarily just make work with a stock computer. You don't get closed loop fueling for, power enrichment, things like that. But I mean, in terms of when you want to move away from a factory piece of electronics, I think it really just depends on what you want to do with the car. If you want a race car that you want a lot of safety features with, I think that's when you have to step away. But for something that people want to drive on the street and just enjoy and, build 1,000 horsepower car, factory computer does just fine in most cases.
Okay, so the things that you had to work past, like I did a little bit of, wasn't for show prep, but it was for trying to figure out how some of this stuff worked.
Yeah, we were looking at HP tuners.
Yep, and when I was reading something about E38 computers, which happens to be what the guy sitting here, Jeff, has, that they used to have a limit of 62 or 62 and a half.
63 and a half, yep.
Okay. and now that's not there anymore.
On later hardware.
Okay. Where's the new limit?
127.
Okay.
So effectively double.
127 what?
Pounds per hour.
Oh, okay. I
per second.
I was reading the stupid chat room. I didn't.
I just looked at it, I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, Tad?
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have that up, and I probably should look away too. But
Okay. So now what I saw is, I guess, a way that other people had done this in the past. If they had, so the older hardware, E38s, you couldn't go past the 63 pound per hour limit. So what I saw that people did is they scaled them using a voltage correction. That, like, they would say that, okay, look, we're just going to put in the voltage correction table, instead of being, 0 or 1, meaning that it's the same, we're going to add 47% to make our injector work correctly. Does that
Right.
work, or is that not the right way to do it?
I haven't seen that work. And I mean, if you watch injector flow rate in the scanner, and maybe it's just the limit of what the channel is reporting, it still stops at that same 8 grams per second value. You switch to newer hardware, and you get double that. But what I started doing was, I would actually go through, I'd scale the whole airflow model. I mean, if you stop and think about it, the whole thing it's a physics-based system, and it's all math. So somewhere you just have to divide by 2 and then multiply by 2 again, and it all comes out in the wash. So I used to do it the hard way, going through scaling airflow and everything, and it was a big pain in the ass, because now it's changing your cylinder load for your spark table, and now you've got to rescale this, and it's not just a simple divide a couple of values. Now you actually have to move things around. But then what became the really easy way to do it was go into your stoic air fuel table, and you say, okay, well, if 0% alcohol, it's 14.7. I'm gonna tell it that it's twice that my stoic is almost 30 to 1, and then enter your injector flow rate as half, and now the math cancels itself out, and everything else works. Everything else is completely untouched, and it's just a much more streamlined way to do it.
Sorry, man. It's cool. I just think that's cool, because it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, you're basically tricking the computer, and this is kind of what everybody had said. There are certain areas you have to work around these issues. So I guess the injector flow rate issue, more than anything, comes up when you're talking about using an alternative fuel like 85, because now you have so much more demand for fuel.
Yeah.
The injector now, most people that wouldn't use that size injector now are.
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. You talk about a CTSV, and for a long time the ID850 was the hot ticket, because everybody was running pump gas, and then flex fuel started to become more prominent, and people started running ethanol, and they're like, holy shit, these injectors are pretty big, but they aren't cutting it now. So even in a CTSV computer, you've got a 127 pound per hour limit, but now you have to run an injector that's even bigger than that. So nowadays, it's just so easy to make so much power with such little effort that you almost always find yourself having to compensate for this. It's probably the most common thing that people have to cheat to make it work. But luckily, it's simple.
And does that same deal happen like with things like mass air meters? Like I saw that you had on you sell a plug to go from an LS3 type air meter, I guess, to like an LS7, like the element itself.
Oh, for a mass airflow?
Yeah.
You're talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different mass airs that it's just a lot of different variables to it. I mean, if you're using like the card style, you can get away with pretty much anything you want.
Well, that's specifically what I'm talking about. Like a lot of people, like the CTSV guys, I see them that they take out, or maybe it was guys. What do those cars have? Do they have the LS7 style in the CTSV from the factory?
I don't know.
No, it's similar to a card style, but it's different.
All right, well,
it's pinned out different.
Right. The reason I'm asking about this is because I was looking at some logs from a friend of mine's car, and it bottoms out that, like, he has an E38 computer, and it bottoms out at, I think it's 86.7 or tops out, it doesn't go any further. Everybody said that mass air meter goes further than that. But if this is a computer thing, that the computer only knows how to process that information, that's what I'm asking. I'm trying to understand the limits better.
Yeah, because then it would matter.
Okay, I understand. So that actually brings up a whole other can of worms, and that's limitations in what you can actually put in the editor versus limitations of what scanner parameters will actually report. I mean, when you break it down, everything in the scanner ultimately has some maximum value that it can't report anything higher than that. So when you're logging mass airflow, it does stop at 86 point something pounds per minute, even though you're actually going way beyond that. A good thing to watch is completely ignore that parameter and look at dynamic airflow. Dynamic airflow will go, God, as far as you want. I don't know what the limit is on that airflow PID because I've never hit it even on 1,500 plus wheel horsepower cars. I mean, I've seen logs that are 200 plus pounds per minute, and it's still
climbing.
It's not capping out.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to watch. And interestingly enough, dynamic airflow is actually what all of your fueling calculations are based off of anyway. So if you're running pure mass air, all dynamic airflow is just filtered airflow.
So what the problem here is? We're having this conversation, and it's actually kind of tough for me because I know the dynamics of what would make an engine work, but I got to tell you, imagine the first time, maybe not for Dave, but even for you, Tom, the first time you look at HP tuners, you're like, okay, there is a lot of strange shit here that I have to process, and I have to figure out what it all means and how it all works. It was just not as straightforward as I would have hoped it to have been. And not saying, I mean, look, if you make something too straightforward and too simple, then it's probably not powerful, so I understand the reason for the complexity, but I'm trying to ask the questions of things that I want to know, and I don't know how to phrase them.
Yeah.
Because I'm not well versed in the software to talk about it. I need a YouTube video or two.
Oh my God. Well, either that or we're going to have to beg Dave to let us call him off the air one day and spend an hour treating us like we're idiots.
Right. But I mean, the working...
You can text me all day long.
Okay. Well, the working past of the issues in the computer, I mean, that's got to be something that everybody's interested in. And I mean, I got to tell you that going from the newer computer back to overcome the limitations, how far back does that reach? What were the generational differences? I mean, I know you said, I think in 2008, and then again in 2010?
2009, 2010 is when the injector flow rate limit became double. For whatever reason, like a 2009 Corvette, you get double the injector flow rate limit. Halfway through the model year for the 09 G8, you got double the limit. But the Z06 specifically didn't get it until 2010. But 09 ZR1 gets the bigger limit. So I don't know when or why, but they did that split. But anyway, that's about the timeline when it got easier to use some huge injector. There were other benefits that came along the way with that too, like adjustable labels for your spark table and some extra tables for closed loop control and for idle control and things like that just make the whole process a little simpler and more controllable. But, as with anything, it evolves over time. GM just keeps adding things that they find useful.
So I want to ask about, one of our guests last week talked to us about the flex fuel deal that you make or you're involved in. Get into that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start with the history of it. I don't even remember what year it was, but sometime back there was people talking about doing flex fuel, and like EFI Live had a custom operating system where you could switch a pin and use other tables and things like that. But people wanted to use an actual sensor. So I guess the pin location for the E38 was already known, but HP tuners didn't have any way to activate everything. So there was a discussion on there and yada, yada, yada. And they started adding support for other computers. And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be an input pin on these other computers. I mean, the code exists. It's all legacy code. I mean, they use the same damn operating system and just activate different features based on what it's going in. So it's all there. So they added some support for a couple operating systems for an E67 computer and an E40. And I had this stuff pinned out on my dining room table, just, poking random pins looking for a response on ethanol content. And finally, I found where it needed to go. And from there, I wanted to just develop something that was, I guess, simplified for the end user to install in their car. And I mean, over time, these kits have evolved, and now, it's a pretty polished product where I have, my own fittings that are true push connect. I make all my own stainless hardline for it, and wiring harnesses and things like that. And it's gotten to the point where it's, you can be brain dead and still install these things, versus going out and buying your own parts, and maybe you save $100 or $200 or something, but then you have to spend the time of doing all this wiring and putting it together. Whereas the stuff that I do is intended for the average guy to install in 5 minutes, and it just takes the thought out of it.
And how much has to be done? Is it just as simple as enabling flex fuel, or does it depend on the generation of ECU if it has the information for it already? I mean, what I'm trying to say, is there a generic flex fuel set of configurations that would be just used with this sensor, or how does that actually work?
Yeah, there's a couple of basic things that you have to activate before it actually starts getting used. I'll preface this with, I really only deal with like Gen 4 and later hardware. So all the LS1 based stuff, the 24X engine, things like that, I don't really deal with. So I don't, they don't have a just easy native way to activate everything compared to the newer stuff. I mean, the newer stuff, you go and you change 3 tables and all of a sudden your flex fuel sensor works and everything's pre-populated and ready to go. So, I mean, as far as the kits that I have, it just makes the plumbing and the wiring a joke. I mean, really the only special thing you have to do is add a wire to the connector for the ECM. And then once you do all of that, you just go in your tune, activate everything, and now your car's flex fuel capable. As long as you got the fuel supply to back it up, you're good to go.
Well, like you said that that all these, the computers all have the same OS. Essentially, this has been an OS that's just grown over the years. It's, GM Windows, 5 or 4 or whatever, all the way up to now wherever we are. So is the flex fuel information in all these OSs already and just not activated because it just knows this car doesn't need it? Is that how that actually works?
Yep. Yeah.
Really?
Everything to use that is all there. It all exists. You don't have to do any segment swaps or anything special like that. It's literally as simple as going in and saying there's 2 very basic parameters. One is flex fuel enable, and obviously you set that to enable. By default, it's disabled. And then the other one is sensor type, which is either virtual or sensor. And everybody wants to use the sensor. Even people that have a setup that's virtual by default, it's a stock Tahoe or something that's a virtual flex fuel. They want to switch it over just because the virtual calculations just get really wonky sometimes.
What?
But beyond that, it's 1 or 2 things, and that's it. It's so simple.
Yeah, well, it's the virtual sensor. Is that just measure the mass of the fuel? Is that what I read, or is that complete? Let's see, here's the problem. I find myself stuck in the same damn trap that everybody else is. I'm looking on the internet to get answers, and I find I'm just looking for something.
Misinformation.
And I've got, 4 different answers.
And you're on the internet.
And they're all claiming they're right. And you give up and you go back to watching, fucking YouTube videos of motorcycle chases.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
I don't like all this stuff. Like, you see, what is the virtual sensor? I mean, I understand what the real sensor is, but what's the virtual?
Virtual, and this is from what I can tell, I don't have any documentation to back this up, but virtual basically relies on you having a very, very accurate airflow model, and no vacuum leaks or something. And it watches, and let's say you go fill your tank up with E85 or something, you've been running on gas, and it's going to watch and check your fuel trims and say, okay, trims are starting to go pretty positive. That means ethanol content must have changed, and then it'll adjust stoic to try and dial it in. But it's just, to me, it seems very convoluted, whereas I'd rather just use a sensor that says, this is your ethanol content, very black and white.
Very black and white. Yeah, that makes much more sense than trying to guess. Yeah. Okay.
Because then if you have a vacuum leak that's driving you to a plus 25% fuel trim, it's not going to falsely change your stoic that you're operating under.
Okay, good point there.
I don't know. I prefer the sensor.
Oh, I think everybody should.
Yeah.
I didn't know because I had brought this up and I had said something about, I think we were talking about getting my buddy Jeff is here. We drove down to buy, what was that thing, a 2003 pickup? Yeah, beat to shit, not what the guy said. So we didn't end up buying it. But I said, hey, Jeff, this other one I'm looking at, it's flex fuel already. He's like, nah, man, it's bullshit. It's not the real one. And that's what this was about, virtual or real. So I get it now. All right, see, the dots are connecting little by little. By 2030, I'll have this all figured out.
Man, we're going to be old.
Yeah.
By then.
There's an awful lot here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So now you got the flex fuel sensor in. What I mean, do you rely on the GM tables that are there for everything from the timing perspective and everything, or are there additional enhancements that you would make based on now alcohol content or ethanol content, I should say?
So a common thing that I find that really needs attention, well, two things. When you go in, your stoic table's already populated in most of these ECMs, and you don't have to mess with it. It's already got everything adjusted based on ethanol content. The things that I find I really have to tweak are cranking fuel, because when you're running ethanol, they want a hell of a lot more cranking fuel when they're cold. The other big thing, though, is transient fueling. For whatever reason, none of that stuff's ever populated. So you need to go in there and you need to say, hey, okay, if I have a really hard throttle change, I need a big shot of fuel when it's on ethanol. Otherwise, it stumbles really bad. And it's even worse when it's cold. So that's one of those things that takes forever to really dial it in and make it feel right. But other than that, I mean, it's as simple as going in and saying, okay, I want to add this amount of timing at this operating condition, and you've got a multiplier table that's based on your ethanol content. So the way that I bring it in so that you have to have a lot of ethanol content to really get your timing up. Let's say you're only at 50%, it's not going to come in very hard. It kind of acts like a safeguard, so people are really only getting that big extra power when they're, on true ethanol, full E85, E70, whatever the hell you're getting from your pump.
When the car can't hurt itself.
Right. Yeah. With government subsidized race gas.
I lost my question. One of the problems of being old.
How old are you now? Like 60?
75. No. I actually wanted to ask about the intake valve temperature.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, the sensors.
But this is what I mean. I think there's shit in these computers that not like look, I'm pretty sure that CTS thing for Jeff's type car, the stock map, had like cam position stuff. And I don't think they had that. So this has to be, I think there's stuff in there, and we'll ask Dave, is there stuff in there that's just not used because it fits a broad variety of stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's a good example. So a 2011 Camaro has a fuel pressure control module. So there's this separate module that controls the fuel pump, and it tries to use variable speed so that you're not just running this thing full blast and relying on your regulator to hold you at 58 PSI. And it's constantly reporting fuel pressure back to the ECM, and it does that over CAN.
Okay, so hold on. Let me, this will actually clarify something for me. So there is actually a fuel pressure sensor reading the fuel pressure and feeding back to the computer.
Yes. On some applications. Now, pretty much everything has it, but GM, I guess, went through their trial phase for it, whether or not they liked the idea, but it's actually awesome. I love doing it. But yes, there is a fuel pressure sensor, and it is connected to this fuel pressure controller. So this is a dedicated module, and the only job this thing has is run your fuel pump and read fuel pressure, and then tell the engine controller what that pressure is. So a 2011 Camaro has this module. A 2011 Corvette does not. It runs off of an older style system where you just have your pump full on all the time, and you rely on an in-tank regulator to hold you at 4 bar. Well, those two cars have the exact same operating system ID. And it is actually possible to go in the code for your 2011 Corvette and turn on the functionality to read that CAN fuel pressure message, which, with the help of a friend, I've done, and it works. So you can add a fuel pressure control module, and it will now send information to your ECM, and now you have live pressure reporting in a Corvette. So all of that code does exist in the background, and it's just not enabled for, and you know, why they do one car a different way than another, I don't know, but it definitely makes sense to just rehash the same operating system and pick and choose what you want to run.
Yeah, it does, rather than, I mean, you wouldn't think development-wise they'd be suited to build a new OS for every car. I mean, they just couldn't.
No.
It is kind of funky, though, that they don't use it in certain things and they use it in other. It's just bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you look at a ZR1. A C6 ZR1 has pressure reporting, whereas a non-ZR1 doesn't. Granted, a ZR1's got a 3-phase brushless pump, and that thing runs like 6 bar under full tilt. But
wow.
So, all right. So this is me, the old guy, connecting the dots because I'm trying to figure out how all this stuff works. Like, because and again, please, everybody understand that when I talk about the fuel injection stuff, I know the older DFI stuff. That's what I knew. That's where I stopped. So to move into this is unique. But when I was helping my friend Jeff with his car, I said, Jeff, man, you got to have a fuel pressure regulator. It's got to be boost reference. And he goes, nah, man, doesn't have a regulator. I'm like, how? And he's like, it's in the tank or in the back. And I'm like, how? So is that how this is all working now? I mean, does the fuel pressure actually regulate itself to compensate for boost, or does the computer just know I have this much pressure, my injector is this big, and I've taken in this much air?
yes to both.
Okay, got it.
So the way it works, and you can actually look at this, talking about a CTSV, if you look at the file for a CTSV under the fuel tab, you've got these different flow modes. You've got low flow, normal flow, high flow, cranking, default, hot fuel, whatever. And you'll notice there's a different pressure for each one of these. And the CTSV, for example, it runs around like I think an 09 actually runs around at 2.5 bar at really low fuel demand. And then you get into a moderate fuel demand and it bumps to 4 bar, and then you actually go wide open throttle, and now it's requesting 4.5 bar of pressure. So the ECU sends the fuel pump controller this message over CAN and says, hey, this is my current fuel flow rate, and this is how much pressure I want. And then the fuel pump controller takes that information and says, okay, this is about how hard I should run the pump. And then it uses a PID control to smooth that out and actually, hit your target, just trim in. And then it just sends something back with how much pressure you got. ECU says, okay, I know my pressure. It'll calculate your effective pressure, and on you go. And it's actually just a very accurate system.
Okay, got it. See, that's the stuff that I didn't get at first but see, now it all makes sense. Now these dots have all been connected, because I was like, how are you compensating for like boost, and how do you make sure your reference is essentially 0? Well, now it's all a math problem. I get it.
All right, so back to the intake valve though. So we found the table.
Yes.
That was intake valve temperature versus, what was it? Fuel pressure?
I can't remember. I think it was fueling.
Yeah, it was. I think it was pressure.
I'm looking.
So anyway, Dave, intake valve temperature.
Yeah.
Is that a table that was put in based on
Estimations or
testing prior? I mean, I know a little bit about valves, and there are no sensors in valves that I'm aware of. So
I'm assuming that's just an incredibly complex MATLAB project with some poor engineer had to sit down and deal with.
Yeah, and that's what we said before.
Yeah, and somebody who's obviously very hip to HP tuners, because I found it. I actually have a CTSV tune in front of me, so I can try to follow along like the retard at home. And there's some guy already wrote, it's the IVT to map table. And okay, and then sure enough, there it is. But yeah, when you see stuff like that, and you're trying to just make sense of it from the outside looking in, like the first time you open up, you're like, huh?
Right.
Like, how do they connect the wires to that valve?
Well, yeah,
how do they stay on?
Yeah, and that's what you did to me before when you were like, okay, so open this and open that, and I'm looking, I'm like, what the?
Yeah, because you're like, Mike, it can't be that bad. And I was like, no, man, you need the overview.
So that was the first one he made me open.
Yeah, you need the overview to kind of make sense of some of this stuff, which this is actually helping me a lot. So
yeah. This is good.
I think the phrase
that initial learning curve is brutal too. I mean, you open it up and it's like, oh my God, there's 2,000 tables, and I don't know what the fuck 90% of these do. And then people just make assumptions about everything, and then they just get so in over their head that can't find their way out.
Yeah, I was all over the place Googling all the 3-letter acronyms, trying to figure everything out to figure out what they meant. Because some of them, they're not very well descripted. But yeah, this is something that, unless maybe somebody who's got a super good handle already on the factory computer stuff could just pick this up and look at it. But this requires a little bit of a primer to me. I mean, just for us old guys.
Yeah.
I can fix your carburetor.
A lot of it comes from trial and error. Over time, it's like, I have this problem. How am I going to fix it? Okay, it's some sort of weird fueling thing. And what the hell's driving? Why as my idle fluctuates, why does my commanded airflow change? And you have to sit there and you stop and you have to come up with some plan and figure out, okay, how am I going to solve this? How am I going to find the culprit? So instead of just wildly changing a bunch of shit, you have to sit down and start thinking, okay, what's driving this change, and how am I going to locate it? And it's funny that you talk about that IVT table, because it's the IVT gain. So it's intake valve temp versus manifold absolute pressure. It's a multiply for open loop fueling. And when an engine is cold, and if it's a really extreme setup, as manifold pressure fluctuates while it's trying to hone in on an idle, your fueling will start to fluctuate, and they work against each other, and it'll just get out of control. And that took me a while to figure out, and finally I got wise and said, okay, the hell with this. I don't want this table to I don't want this multiplier to change based on manifold pressure. So you have to just set up a plan of attack and not just try to guess. But then it's like, how do I set up a plan of attack? If you stare at it long enough, it'll eventually start to make sense.
How long? How long is that going to be, Dave?
Your mileage may vary.
There we go.
Yeah, no doubt.
No, it's
some people get 25 years of experience in 2 years, and some people get 2 years of experience in 25 years. It just, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, some of this stuff kind of makes sense, but like I remember, what was the thing we were looking at, Tom, that we were like, what are we? Because I couldn't even, where was this? Hang on. Bear with me.
When we were both stupid.
I don't know where this is. Well, I'm going to talk, but we were trying to look at this thing, this one table, and it has all these acronyms, and the numbers go up and down and up and down.
They're
and
all
up
over
and
the place. They make no sense.
I'm gonna find it. Just keep him going, Tom. Hang on, let me find this.
I was just remembering what it is. Because it was there was a displacement on demand table for it. There was a high altitude and a low altitude table.
Here's one of them. It's VE normal map coefficient. Now, I don't. Manifold switch closed. Manifold switch closed. DOD. Manifold switch open. DOD. Manifold switch open. So just looking at this from a chart perspective, 124, 48, 5, 2, minus 30, back to 3.8, 47, 28. I mean, none of this.
It doesn't make any sense.
Like, this is like one of those goofy math problems that they give you that they want you to say, what's the pattern?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Find X.
It's an elephant.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I've actually never messed with any of those tables.
Perfect.
See, this is the problem. When you're an idiot and you don't know what not to look at, you look at everything because you're trying to figure it out. And I saw some of this stuff, and I'm like, what is all this?
So, Dave, should we not look at a bunch of it?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. My philosophy has always been like, change the least amount of stuff that you need to, because at the end of the day, GM doesn't use HP tuners. They don't use EFI Live to edit this crap. They use whatever proprietary bullshit they have. That's probably awesome. And then they have definition files, and they know exactly how all this stuff works. And the rest of us are left effectively guessing.
Well, and that's kind of what this is. HP tuners and EFI Live or whoever, they've assembled a way to manipulate essentially the tables that they either found or through their own trial and error, and they put the front end on it. That's what we're using if we do this, correct?
Yeah. It's a polished way to edit hex in a bin file. When you break it down, that is exactly what the editor is. It is, you type in some value, idle, your target idle speed at 80 degrees C. You type in 600, and all the software does is convert that to some hex value at some memory location, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the core of things, that's exactly what this does. Now, knowing those memory locations and those conversions and what the hell they are, that's a big deal. So that's where their value comes from. But at the core, that's the software is doing something very simple. It's just they've added so much value in labeling everything. Now they don't, they'll tell you sometimes too, we don't know what this table does, but we'll add it for you.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard that from Cobb too. I've heard that because when they open up tables, they're just a bunch of numbers.
But did these guys actually crack all this stuff? Like, are HP tuners like the hackers of the automotive industry, or does GM say, "Hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look at this memory address to this memory address, and if you fill in the blanks here, this will be, I don't know, the tire pressure, whatever."
Yeah, sensor table.
Did they think they got a hint, or did they really reverse engineer all of this?
Dave?
I don't know. They had to have started with something. I mean, what that is, I don't know, because I'm not capable of doing that. It's way out of my league. But, I do know I've gotten an A2L file, which is a definition file of what everything is. It outlines what a value is, what its memory location is, what the conversion for it is, things like that. So I've looked through that. I've edited some stuff in just a raw bin file. Hell, I hacked the cruise control in my Cadillac because I was getting really pissed that I couldn't set it lower than 20 miles or 25 miles an hour.
Because you needed to set it, or just because you wanted to be able to do it?
Man, hey, the school zone in my neighborhood is 20 miles an hour, and I am lazy.
Okay. So you went in and changed the table for the school zone. You got to love that.
That's the real life version of the pit lane speed.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Because he could.
That's right.
Fucking jealous.
It's funny. There was another limitation too. Like if you're going 30 miles an hour and you set the cruise, you can only set the cruise to 10 miles an hour over what you're currently traveling. It drove me nuts too. So
I played that game with the cruise control, trying to see like how quickly I could bump it up and how much throttle it would give. Like, what will it really do? I played
hitting the plus the
yeah,
plus
to see if I get the thing to floor itself or what it'll do.
You're
but
an idiot too.
I fucked it all that stuff because like when it can do something, you want to know how and how far can you go?
How much? Yeah. So what did you do to yours, Dave? You unlimited?
Well, like I said, like if I'm doing 30 miles an hour, I can't increase it to over 40, but now I can increase it to 150 if I feel like it. There's other stuff in there too. You can actually change how much the maximum amount of torque the ECU will allow to accelerate. But I don't need my car to go wide open throttle to accelerate 2 miles an hour, so I wasn't interested.
That's pretty cool stuff, though.
Yeah, there's an awful lot in here, an awful lot. And knowing what you said about using just the things you need to use rather than getting stuck in everything, because there is so much in here. If you've never looked at one of these HP tuner things, if you never did this before and you looked at it, I would even imagine that a lot of guys that do aftermarket programming and they go into an HP tuners or an LS editor probably like, what the fuck? There's a lot of stuff.
I've been told that Like if you learn on HP tuners and you get pretty proficient with tuning, stock ECUs, then when you move to an aftermarket one, it's extremely easy.
That makes sense because of so many less tables in the aftermarket.
Things do exactly what you think they should do.
Yeah,
There's not 7 other routines buried that you don't know about.
Yeah, and I've heard that in a lot of the manufacturers, I guess all of them, that they have their layers and layers deep of controls that you would think you could change something, and it affects so many other things that you kind of have to know.
It's just
go ahead.
I was going to say it's just getting worse. You look at an E38 or an E67, and then you compare that to the engine controller in a C7 Corvette or a 2016 Camaro or something, and it's just, oh my God! Now everything is so much more complicated. Now it's you push the gas pedal a certain amount, and you're requesting a certain amount of torque, and it has to go through all of these calculations to figure out how much throttle to give it, and it's completely disconnected and very difficult for people to get their head around.
Well, it's funny that you mention that because one of the things that I poked around with getting some sample files is some of the transmission tuning capability. And I guess this gets pretty involved because as we've gone away from a 3-speed or a 4-speed, now we're not dealing with, we're applying something to stop something or cause motion in another direction. We're releasing and applying. So now you've got timing,
right?
And you've got timing and you've got slip. And then as you put more power in, that target moves. And this is really involved stuff. I mean, the transmission side of things looks about as hard as it gets. I don't even know what to say about it. Everybody said that the 8-speed that they put in the Corvette was amazing. Now, I don't know if they're different than the conventional GM 8-speeds, just with a different configuration. But, I mean, there's an awful lot there. I mean, I don't even know where to start with that.
Yeah, those black magic and lies as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, more black magic. Hey, I got a question from a listener. It's way back on the chat room, but a couple of guys have asked, what can you do about traction control with a stock ECU? I mean, is there anything, any way to work that in?
There's a couple tricks you can do, and it really depends on the hardware that you have. You can modify the maximum allowed torque for factory traction control, but the reality is that normal traction control works very poorly when you have a lot of horsepower, because it just doesn't react quick enough, and when it does react, it overcompensates. I had a C6Z06 that was twin turbo, and it made 800 to the tires on the lowest setting, and if you floored it in second gear and the tires broke loose with traction control on, the car just went apeshit. Didn't know what to do. So I never bothered messing with it. I just said, you know what, I'm just going to fix my traction instead of relying on it electronically. But then you look at things like the performance traction management and the ZR1 or the launch control that's in a lot of the 2010 plus stuff, and it works totally different, where it'll start cutting injectors to maintain some certain ratio of slip, and you can set a rev limiter based on your front wheel speed. Strategies like that work way better, and it just takes some tweaking to get it to work the way that you want it to. Admittedly, I haven't spent a lot of time messing with that because my thing is always just, work on suspension, work on tires, make it work better to begin with, because no matter, you can get as complicated as you want with electronics, but grip is grip.
Hey, somebody just asked, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. Somebody kind of answered it. In a Trailblazer, and listen, man, I know this is kind of off the wall, but a Trailblazer SS, is it possible to turn off stable track?
Yeah, pull the ABS fuse.
Oh, just like that.
That's what I always did. Anytime I was working on one that was going crazy, is pulled out the ABS fuse.
Okay.
Do you need special software to do that, or is it just?
I don't think you do. There's
no plastic thing to pull the fuse.
There's no table for that either. It's really nice.
It's a very specific needle nose pliers.
There we go.
Well,
maybe one day HP tuners will, support brake modules, but I can't imagine they will due to liability.
Oh yeah, could you imagine that shit? Yeah, everybody turning off the anti-lock features they don't like, and then somebody runs over 3 old ladies coming back from church, and it's all HP Tuner's fault. Yeah, I hear you on that one. My 2013 has that launch thing. I've used it like 3 times. It sucks. It doesn't particularly work very well. I don't think I can do better than it can do.
Well, that's you.
Well, no, I mean, I think, well, yeah, I guess you've got the average,
Schmo.
Corvette midlife crisis guy buys a Corvette like my neighbor. He never even knew the exhaust opened up in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a legit story. I mean, that's probably a lot of the people that buy these
Most
things.
of them, yeah.
So I started fucking with this launch control one day, and it launches and it clamps down so hard on everything and then ramps it in so slow. And I'm like, I know you've got more here than this to get you going. It's like it overcompensates. And I don't even know if that kind of stuff's adjustable, but to me, if you were trying to make a traction system work, I think that needs to be in another style computer. I don't think the GM's ever going to be able to handle that.
Yeah.
My thought anyway.
I'm waiting for
I
Dave.
think the hardware is there. It's just a matter of doing the code for it. I mean, you also have to factor in how quickly that engine can react. With a DI, God, it's a lot easier because now you're directly in the cylinder. When you cut fuel, you're immediately down on power. And shit, that's how they pull power for an upshift.
Yeah, it's true.
That's what gives them that signature crack when that 8 or 10 speed transmission shifts up.
That makes.
I mean, it's never. The reality is they don't give 2 shits about some guy drag racing his twice the stock horsepower car on a stock computer.
Yeah,
So why would they put the resources into?
Yeah, it doesn't even come to play. One of our guys just asked if you have a preference. Do you prefer cutting injector flow for traction control or ignition timing?
I prefer cutting injectors because if you cut ignition, you can get extremely high EGTs, and I have watched firsthand from cars catching on fire from that.
Yeah, that's the extreme.
Or you just burn the shit out of the valves.
Break exhaust valves, blow the engine up. Yeah, plenty.
Now I say that, and at the same time, a lot of guys like meth injection. They spray it for cooling. Well, your meth isn't necessarily going to shut off. So now you've just created an extremely lean condition and causing just as much damage. I don't think there's any magic bullet for that one.
Yeah, usually isn't.
Really though.
Yeah, usually it's wheel speed sensors and the throttle blades connected, but the factory stuff doesn't do that. I don't think.
I did want to work on something just to goof around. So you can actually disable injectors through OBD2, just sending certain commands. And wheel speed is readily available on the CAN bus, and you can read it and do whatever. So I was actually looking into making my own plug-in traction control that you plug it in, and based on your front to rear wheel speed ratio, start cutting injectors out, kind of like that. What was it, Race Logic, I think. But theirs was like a hardwire injector cut system. Just as a joke, I want to try to do it all through CAN, but we'll see how catastrophically that fails.
Got it. Hey, so you keep mentioning CAN. I
love CAN.
I know. I heard. Can you, for the listeners that don't really know what it is, give us the short version on what CAN actually is or does and why it's so cool.
CAN is a data communication system that's very robust and I would say resilient to interference as long as it's wired properly and set up properly. But it allows multiple computers to talk to each other at an extremely high rate and transfer information back and forth. That's the gist of it, and it's encoded in a certain way where each message consists of the arbitration ID or just the ID, whatever you want to call it. And then the next piece of information is the data length of that message. And then you've got the message itself, all the data that's contained in it. So you might have, and I'm going to talk in decimal when it, everybody's probably going to bitch that it should be about hex, but you might have message 201 and the data length is 8. And now you've got 8 bytes in this message that all contain some value, and each one of those bytes means something. So in that message, you might have 2 bytes that make up your engine speed. So if you decode that, you can go in and you can look at that and say, okay, there's message 201. I'm looking at these 2 bytes, and now I've got engine RPM, and I can get that straight off the CAN bus. And there's just a lot of basic information that these modules are broadcasting to each other that maybe they need, maybe some modules don't need. There's some things I've found that I'm like, why the hell is this on the bus? You know, why does a body control module need to know what your barometric pressure is? Who knows?
But you're thinking that there are reasons for a lot of it. Some of it might be ancillary, but some of it is, or most of it probably is necessary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you look at a C6 Corvette, there's one CAN message that contains your actual throttle position, the I don't remember what it's called, adjusted throttle position, then there's actual pedal position and adjusted pedal position. Oh, effective, that's what it is. So there's 8 bytes, and all of these contain everything about your gas pedal position and your actual throttle position. And, you know, your ABS module uses that to determine what kind of driving you're in, what mode you're in, engine RPM, how much torque you're calculated to be making right now. Everything uses that. That's a big one for automatic transmissions.
Yeah, well, it seems like
shift based on torque.
Yeah, and it seems like all the stuff that I've read about some of these, you know, again, newer transmissions, 6, 8, and 10 speeds, that like torque reduction between gear changes is like required. So I guess for like for the transmission to know everything it has to do, all of this data has to tie in.
Right. Yeah. Well, the transmission it's taking the torque reading from the engine controller along with a bunch of other information, and it's saying, okay, I've got 600 foot-pounds of torque right now, and I need to make a shift. What the hell am I supposed to do with that information? And it knows, okay, with that much torque, I need this much pressure. I need to shift it this quickly, and it just knows what to do. And then it sends a request back to the ECM over CAN saying, hey, cut engine power by this much for this long so that I can safely complete this shift.
And it all happens in milliseconds.
Yep.
Wow.
You look at these CAN messages will refresh on a timer, and that timer is anywhere from 12.5 milliseconds all the way up to 1 full second. Non-important things like your tire pressure from your body control module that updates every second, but engine RPM updates every 12.5 milliseconds.
Yeah,
wow.
You would think that would have to, yeah.
Well, I mean, the slow stuff doing refreshing every second is actually funny because it's every second, which is not actually that slow.
Yeah.
Crazy the amount of information that's gotten and used versus the carburetor days.
Oh yeah. You know what's funny though? You put a carb in front of me, and I wouldn't know what the hell to do with it other than don't let gas sit in it for too long.
Well, you can call me. I can help you with that one.
Yeah, Mike. That's right in Mike's wheelhouse, man.
Next time my mower doesn't start.
See that's
Then you buy a new mower.
Yeah, you just buy a new mower at that point with the way things are today.
I'll switch to an electric one.
Or that.
I'll swap it.
See, when you get into all this stuff, I mean, that's what I'm probably thinking about this a little incorrectly, because I'm looking at ways to apply what the computer does to the carburetor. Like how, like when I look at like the I'm sure the timing table is fair to do this with.
Yeah.
But like I'm looking at it knowing what, I mean, half the people I talk to don't even know this is going to sound messed up, but half the people that we talk to now, they talk about dwell. But when they're talking about dwell, they're talking about for a coil.
Yeah.
Dwell for us to make that coil work was actually done at the points, and you adjusted it with a screw.
Yep.
They don't know what it really is or what it really did back then, but they know what it does now.
Right.
So for them, there's a disconnect. If you told them set the dwell in this car, they wouldn't know how, but if you gave them HP tuners, they'd understand it. So like when I look at things like vacuum advance. You used to be able to buy a vacuum advance kit that it would be very light spring. You could adjust the spring with an Allen screw from the side. You could set travel limits. And then, of course, you get the mechanical curve kit. You got the weights, you got different springs, and you could bring everything in. And what you're doing is you're drawing that map. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
mechanically.
It keeps you away from light pedal ping, but wakes the car up at the right times. I mean, that's what all this is. So that I can translate. But when you get into this other stuff, I don't know that it translates too easily because there's things you could do here that you couldn't do with a carburetor.
Yeah.
There's a lot here.
It's a lot. We're going to be texting Dave a lot, I think. So what do you got going on in the future? Like, are you working on any cool products that you want to talk about?
Working on some of my own fittings that are basically just based around making these kits that I sell easier to install, work better. I do the flex fuel kits, but then I do these auxiliary fuel pump kits because, with ethanol, you just need more fuel. That's just how it goes, but not everybody necessarily wants to drop their tank. So, the one downside to what I do is you got to drill a hole in your gas tank and tap it and basically sump the thing, but it's a hell of a lot easier than pulling your gas tank out and fucking around with all that. So, my big thing with all that, though, is I want it to fit a very specific way. I want it to fit very nice. I want it to install very easy. And I prefer to use electronics to activate everything. So what I've been doing for a while, I use basically an electronic version of a Hobbs switch. Plugs into your map sensor and just reads the voltage and then turns the pump on at a certain voltage threshold. So now you've got this solid state piece that's not a mechanical switch, which is what a Hobbs is. There's a hysteresis built into it so that once the pump turns on, it can't immediately turn back off, things like that. But the more interesting thing that I recently did, I did a CAN-based pump controller that's got PWM built into it too. So what this one does is it will actually...
PWM?
Yeah, pulse width modulation.
Okay.
So normally you turn a fuel pump on, you get this massive spike of pressure as everything tries to level out. These systems are all used on cars that have these pump controllers where they're trying to, instead of using a regulator, it's using pressure feedback to change the speed of the pump and maintain whatever you're requesting, 58 PSI. So anyway, normally you turn that pump on, you get this huge hit of pressure as the factory pump tries to scale itself back and maintain whatever you're commanding. Well, the CAN one is kind of cool because it just sits there and silently listens to everything on the CAN bus, and it's looking for something very specific. It's looking for the requested fuel pressure, which you can go in the tune and you can edit. And you can say, I want to request, I'm going to talk in metric because everything is in metric anyway. I want to request 500 kPa of fuel pressure, which is the set point for my controller. So, that your stock fuel pump starts to give out at some certain fuel flow rate. You say, okay, at that fuel flow rate, trigger high flow mode, request 500 kPa. Well, now it'll turn my pump on. But instead of coming on full blast, it actually soft starts it. So it starts at 50% duty cycle and then comes up to full over a tenth of a second, which really takes the edge off. But it creates a true on-demand fuel pump compared to using a Hobbs switch or, just some electrical pressure switch, something like that. Because you can set it to come on at a very specific fuel flow rate, which would happen to be right when your stock pump starts to give out. So it works a lot better, and the people that have been using it seem to like it a lot more. There's another cool feature that's built into it where if you have the key on, but the engine is not running, and you push the gas pedal, it'll actually run the auxiliary pump.
Oh.
That's a big deal for the new direct injection crowd because you have no way to drain your gas tank on those. So this, with this, you need to drain your tank and change out to Purity 85 or something. You crack a fuel line loose somewhere, turn the key on, and just push the pedal down. And then the harder you push the pedal, the harder it'll run the pump. So it's based on pedal position. But it only operates in that mode if the engine's not running. If engine speed is 0 is what it's looking for.
That's very cool.
So I hope to do some more CAN projects. I want to do a CAN-based nitrous controller. So you're not actually tapping into anything; it's all CAN.
Wow, that would be cool.
And how did you? I mean, are the commands or at least the data sets, are they currently available? Like, is there a map, or are people like exploring the GM CAN bus and figuring out what everything does over time?
No, you have to slam your dick in a door and just sit down and try to figure it out.
Wow.
There's no easy way to it. I mean, there's things out there called DBC files, which is a database for CAN values. And if you're lucky enough to get one, it takes all the hard work out of it. For me, I had to just figure it out on my own. I started on the C6, and once you kind of start to figure out one or two items, it becomes easier to figure out other things. So like engine RPM, you know that exists somewhere. So you sit there and you're sitting there idling, and then you rev it up and you look for what's changing. And you say, okay, these values right here are changing. So this must be engine speed. And then you have to sit down and try to figure out, okay, this value is what it's showing at about 1,000 RPM. And then this is the value at 2,000 RPM. And you have to figure out, how does that transfer? How does that convert? Luckily, it's all based in some multiple/divisor of 2. So, 1 bit might be half an RPM or a quarter of an RPM or an eighth of an RPM. You're never going to run into a scenario where something is 1/5 or, 1/13 or anything goofy like that. It's predictable, which helps you.
Wow, it's amazing.
So once you start to figure out a couple, you can start to figure out some other ones. The hardest one I had to figure out, I would say, is the fuel economy calculation on the C6 Corvette, because it doesn't. So on a CTSV, for example, you're lucky it spits out raw fuel flow rate because it has this fuel pressure control module. And that's very black and white. But on a C6 Corvette, that module's not there, so it doesn't need to send that information out. It sends out a rolling summation of how much fuel you've consumed. And it took me forever to figure that one out.
But you did.
I got there.
Damn.
Wow.
There's still so much crap, though, that I don't know what the hell it is. Status bits, but
you keep plugging.
You can play with it.
You just keep plugging away at it.
Yeah, I mean, you sit down and you look at it. I was doing something for somebody else. They wanted to put a Turbo 400 in a CTSV, and they wanted their dash display to work for what gear they're in. So we did this micro switch setup on the shifter, and then I got in my car. I have a CTSV. I got in and was looking at it and was shifting through the gears, looking at, okay, when you're in park, what's the CAN message for park? Okay, when you're in neutral, what's the CAN message for neutral? Went through, programmed the shifter assembly to be able to pick up what the transmission's in and then send the appropriate CAN message.
Well, you are obviously
A dork?
I wasn't going to go right to dork, but no, it's actually really cool.
I'll put it out there.
Yeah, right. No, it's cool what you do. We appreciate the that you came on and kind of enlightened us a little bit, certainly on the HP tuners. I got one more question. One of our guys just asked, and I don't even know if maybe you've done this before, but somebody asked if you do any HP tuner classes. Are you well versed in that?
I've thought about it and I've been asked about it, but the reality is I'm too impatient and probably not friendly enough to get away with doing it.
So that'd be a no.
Yeah, probably not. It comes down to time, though, too. Time versus money. If, I'd love to fill a classroom with people and say, yeah, pay me $500 a person and I'll sit you down for 8 hours and spew some crap to you. But, I would probably constantly second guess myself as to whether or not people are getting anything of value. I'm not a teacher by any means. I don't have the...
No, and I get that.
Stuff to do a good job at that.
Yeah, I get that. People have certain talents. There's a lot of guys that can play baseball, but they can't coach. a lot of guys that can tune cars and they can't teach. You know, that's just one of those things.
That's what people were asking here. Does he teach a class on this? It's like,
Yeah.
guess not.
Nope. He's a dork.
I mean,
just
you
a
know,
dork.
anything I would teach is just what I've assumed. This is the way things work. I can't guarantee that's right. So I wouldn't want to put my name behind that and say, yes, this is how this works.
Well,
Because the reality is, this is what works for me. It may not be what works for everybody.
yeah, well, it looks like the track record is pretty good. All right. Well, listen, man, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on and enlighten us and, answer some questions. Plug your business, give us your numbers and website and all that stuff so people can get a hold of you.
Sure. Everything goes through my website, www.dsxtuning.com. There's a lot of just hodgepodge stuff on there. It's a pretty one-stop shop for flex fuel kits, fuel pump systems. I resell HP tuners. I resell injector dynamics. I only deal with products that I fully believe in, to the core. Pretty soon I'm going to carry my own wideband that's made by ECM, which is the same company that makes stuff for the EPA and General Motors and Toyota. Just because I want to make available the tools that I use. And like I said, I really am only interested in dealing with stuff that I 100% believe in. So I'm not going to just talk crap to everybody. Not me.
Certainly takes variables out of the rest of your situation.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. When you take choices away, it becomes a lot easier for people to just get what they need,
Okay, so everything through the website. Again, Dave, we appreciate your time. We may be calling you again in the future. Actually, Mike and I might call you one day and just try to pick your brain a little bit if that's okay.
Yeah, bring it on. Sounds good.
All right. Well, again, man, thank you so much for being on, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dave.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun. It was good to talk. So,
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
See you, man.
Thanks, bud.
take care.
All right.
Thanks.
This is so hard for me, dude.
Well, it's because you don't know. We're going to get this. It's not,
Well, it's nice to know the people that know don't fully understand.
Well,
it either,
no,
but
and
yeah.
that's part of what makes this hard for me,
Yeah.
because now this is probably the fourth or fifth person I've talked to with specifically the factory programming. That's kind of like
they stumble through.
it's like a guess.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it's
That's not how the world should work.
No, it's not, but it does, man. My perception has been, and based on, what I've heard, most OEs don't help people crack their stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so.
Some are way harder than others. Now, Ford, from what I understand, although they have that problem with the Mustangs driving around into crowds, they
I wonder whatever happened to that butthurt guy that was on the fan page.
Who knows?
Nathan and Dan ran him right out of there.
they
Oh,
did.
God.
No, but Ford was pretty liberal with what they allowed people to see, from what I understand, and it helped them. I mean, that's why people played with that stuff. And Chrysler is on the other end of the spectrum, where they lock down everything. They don't want any problems, and everybody else falls kind of in the middle. Cobb Tuning has reverse engineer guys that break down Porsches and Subarus and everything, and they talk about it. They open up tables and they mean nothing.
It's amazing.
And they just figure them out. Yeah, that's you probably look at it when you do what they do and say it looks like a timing table, or it looks like a whatever. But then there's other shit. They're like, wow, that must be that intake valve temperature versus map. So
Was Chrysler like that when Benz went into ownership, or?
no, I think they've always been.
I don't know. When they used to have DSM stuff, though, was kind of a easier thing back then, I guess.
Well, but that was Mitsu.
yeah.
So they probably just didn't police it.
Yeah.
When they went to the DSX computer, that's when they really put the hammer down.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they've been tough.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
I don't know, man.
Mike's bummed. I'm just going to tell everybody right now. Mike's bummed out because he is definitely a cut and dry, black and white type guy.
It's like you've disrupted my whole world. And this is like the fifth person that said, and look, I understand, you know who this works perfectly for? This works good for Alan. Just, whatever, just wing it. He's that guy. Well, just change this and
I don't think it's quite that bad.
Blows my hair back, whatever. I don't have that.
I don't think it's quite that gray.
Well,
it's less gray than Alan.
Think about it like
and
this.
I think you're picking up on this stuff a lot more than you think you do.
No,
yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah,
No, I'm not.
Mike, think like when Apple's going to have
Hold up a minute here,
right.
because this will be good for everybody that wants to make fun of me. I'm gonna let him go, but
it's very rare.
I'm gonna let him go.
He's gonna forget. Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Keep repeating it to yourself. Inside voice, Ted. Inside your head.
voice.
I'm gonna talking about this. I spent the better part of this weekend. You sat here after we pulled stuff, and I just kept toggling through tables and looking at stuff, and then sitting there thinking, because I'm trying to process all this. So no, I'm not getting this. There's a series of dots, and I feel like one is off by Pluto and one is on the desk, and they're that far away.
Yeah, but at the same time, you were able to pull information out of those tables and start talking about it. When I was looking at those tables, I saw
it's because the real tough stuff that I pulled out, Jeff, was things that made sense, like ignition timing. Okay, well, I know what that is because that's a spinny thing you put on the top that you put all the wires in the top of the motor. That's why I got that.
Yeah.
But when you get into some of this stuff
it could be worse. At least nothing was revolving around Uranus.
This is true.
Yeah.
All right, Tad, thought?
Now you think about it. When like Apple's going to have its latest iPhone 5 or whatever the hell, and it's all under, keeps, nobody can find out about it. Then all of a sudden, one winds up in a bar. Some guy was drunk and he left his freaking iPhone, his test iPhone there.
Yep.
And, Gizmodo gets it or whatever, and they do their whole run up on it. Oh, this is what it's going to have. Now, Apple being how locked down they are on all their coding and all that crap, you think they would be giving their stuff to a guy that's going to be drunk enough to leave it out in the open someplace at a bar?
So what you're telling me is we need to go to GM and get an engineer drunk.
That's exactly it.
And bring him to a bar.
Couldn't you get a programmer from GM to a bar and say, hey, put your phone on record or something like that, or take notes? So what's with the CAN bus anyway? It's like, I'm an idiot. Just explain to me this. What's this code? Just something like that. These guys they're engineers. They're drunks.
Well,
so
we need to have Banish back on again.
Yeah, because he probably knows a little bit more about this.
He does.
Even more so. And I'd be willing to bet that
Allison's probably getting sweaty right now because I just said Greg Banish.
Uh-oh. Yeah. I have to be careful because I was told again I'm insensitive. All the feminists got me the other day on Twitter. That's a whole nother
story. Hashtag
God.
me too?
Yeah.
Are you a hashtag me too girl?
Oh no, but I did fully recognize that was a place to just like kind of poke, like if you're poking it like you see a wasp nest and say, is there anything in there, and you poke it and you back up a little bit and you poke, that's what that was. And as soon as I hit it just a little too hard, wham.
All right.
That was great.
They'll come out.
All of our female listeners hate us now.
Yeah, I'm sure like all
no,
three
they
of them.
don't. Yeah.
Well, it's just, I don't know, it's just me. I like doing shit like that.
Yeah, you
a little
do.
Abusive.
No.
All right. Well,
hey, do we have a guest for next week? Of course we don't.
No, we don't, but Matt Blasco actually got me some people I have to talk to.
Oh, cool.
So we can.
Yeah, I got a
get this
couple
all
to talk
worked
to.
out.
Yeah, we'll work something out.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see you next week. Anything to say, Tad? Bet your thumb?
Hope it heals. Hope I get a thumbnail again one day.
There you go. All right. We'll be back next week. See you later, everybody.
Bye.
See you.